So, like, I'll start with a very, I won't say it is a common case scenario, it is actually complicated patient. So, all of you can read it. A 50-year-old person who has known history of diabetes and he is on metformin. He basically got admitted to gastro ward with pancreatitis. So on third day, he developed some non-specific symptoms like irritability, perioral tingling, carpopedal spasm, and psychosis. So it was known that he was taking heavy amount of alcohol, and possibly that was the reason for the pancreatitis. And he also recently diagnosed with hypertension and receiving telmisartan and torsemide for the same. So general examination revealed he had generalized hyperreflexia and positive Trossius sign, which is usually seen in patients with hypocalcemia. It is a sign of excitability of the nerves. So the resident did an ECG in which one could find there was T-wave inversion and the corrected QT interval was 500 milliseconds. So which was bit prolonged. So to know whether the blood sugars are well controlled, in the recent past we did a A1C that was 12%. That means he had very poor glycemic control at admission. Our current blood sugars at that moment were normal, that is because of the insulin infusion, and did not have any ketoacidosis. So these are the few lab parameters which you can just note it down. So like you can see, the calcium is low, vitamin D is also low, and the potassium is also low. So like any all alcoholic patient, when they come to the hospital and if they develop some of these symptoms, they are given thiamine along with the dextrose infusion. Somebody thought a patient may be in delirium tremens, did fluorodiazoxide. Okay, I agree. He had hypocalcemia, hypokalemia, and vitamin D deficiency. So the replacements were given. So even after provision of all this treatment, he had persistent perioral tingling, numbness. Even after 24 hours, Trosilsine was positive, and we can see the serum calcium is 8.2, and these are the parameters. Potassium still on the lower side, corrected QTC still elevated, and the T waves are still flattened. So what we will do next? Any of you of the following investigations? So first of all, you should mention what are you thinking and why you need the investigation, how it is going to help you. Any volunteer? You should not hesitate. It is just a random discussion.
This patient has parathyroid dysfunction, probably secondary to hypomagnesemia. So I'll do a IPTH as well as serum magnesium. And hypomagnesemia could be
Okay.
because of the fluid diuretic he was taking. And
Okay. So you are thinking the patient might have hypomagnesemia. Agree?
hypoparathyroidism, and
So why do you think
because
the
of
patient has
hypomagnesemia.
parathyroid dysfunction?
So because he has got features of hypocalcemia, low calcium,
Okay.
normal ALP.
Okay.
So I think the patient has got and parathyroid dysfunction, which can be seen with magnesium deficiency.
Okay. I agree with you. Actually, your name not visible on the screen. May I know your name, please?
And Sundaram.
Okay, Sundar. So you are right. I agree with you, but I will suggest we should not do a IPTS at this moment. This thing we can discuss when we go through the brief discussion about hypomagnesemia and other features. Why PTS should not be done, and if at all suspecting when to do the PTS. Otherwise, I agree with you. The next question I'll ask: will you do a urinary magnesium?
I feel the urinary magnesium will be high because he's already on. Uh, if the serum magnesium is low, then it means that he's losing it from the urine only.
So, do you think is it going to be helpful to do urinary magnesium?
Yeah, we can do so. We can identify the etiology of hypomagnesemia.
Yes, I think you are right. It will help us. It will guide us to identify the etiology. Like we'll discuss regarding the causes of hypomagnesemia, but I can mention there are several causes which can cause hypomagnesemia. So if you go through it carefully, I'm just telling the number of causes. One, pancreatitis. Second, alcohol. Third, torsemide. Fourth, poorly controlled diabetes. So there are at least 4 or 5 causes which can actually lead to hypomagnesemia in this patient. We do so doing a urinary magnesium will definitely help us guiding whether it is actually due to urinary loss in magnesium, like in torsemide, diabetes mellitus, or alcohol, or it may be because of pancreatitis, where it will be mostly because of the sequestration in the third space. So the urinary magnesium won't be high. So I basically gave an overall idea ki how it is going, what the things we are going to discuss in the subsequent slides. So anyway, the resident did all of them. You can see the IPTS is slightly high, magnesium is low, urinary magnesium is high, potassium you can say the fractional excretion of magnesium is also high. That means there is loss of the urinary magnesium. So how you are going to treat it? Anyone? Whether you'll give oral magnesium hydroxide or IV magnesium chloride or intramuscular Maxol, or you will increase the calcium and calcitriol. Anyone else apart from Sundaram?
Injectile magnesium sulfate, IM,
Okay, why not magnesium chloride? People say the literature says magnesium chloride is the preferred therapy, but unfortunately this is not available in our market. So I'll ask anyone, I think anyone from endocrinology, nephrology, or immunology. What are the problem if you give intramuscular Maxol? I will say I won't prefer that. Anyone from obstetric and gynecology or MRH? Many times they give Maxol. Or cardiology people, they frequently give, they sometimes may give Maxol for torsades pointes.
their dose titration may be issue, excessive correction.
Okay, Manoj, I'll put in this way. Actually, the amount of magnesium in magnesium sulfate actually really low. And by giving intramuscular, you may not get an optimal magnesium dose at all. You won't get at all. Maybe by giving IV Maxol, because IV magnesium chloride is not available in our setup, you may get small amount of magnesium, which is still okay, but giving intramuscular, it won't fulfill the purpose. Why not oral magnesium hydroxide? It can still increase the serum magnesium levels. May I ask Rudrapan the same question? Rudrapan, I think from immunology. Okay, here the patient is quite symptomatic, so one should prefer a parenteral route rather than the oral route. Okay, now coming to why most of us do not know, because out of thing they are quite prevalent in the patient who are sick. Second thing, the lack of awareness. So not only most of the resident, even most of the specialists, they have an lack of awareness. Even if you do a PubMed search, so this figure was taken in an article, review article in 2015, you can see the number of articles in PubMed till that date over a period of 5 years. If you look for the sodium, potassium, calcium, they are in numbers of 10,000s, but for magnesium, you can just see around 2,000. So overall, there is a lack of awareness for magnesium related disorder. So now I'll briefly mention its physiological role. Basically, it is crucial for energy metabolism as well as neuromuscular function. Like I said, they are quite common in patients who are sick, especially in the medical wards. So this prevalence of hypomagnesemia may range from 20% to 40% depending upon the severity of the illness. Another thing which I like to highlight, most of the magnesium are confined to the intracellular compartment. So when we measure the serum magnesium, it really does not truly reflect the body magnesium store. So when you get hypomagnesemia, when you measure the serum magnesium in the body fluid, that means the body actually severely depleted of the magnesium. That is the reason even after normalization of the serum magnesium. Why 5 to 7 days? This actually helps in restoration of the body intracellular magnesium stores. So a brief outlook regarding the absorption and excretion of the magnesium, and we'll discuss why it is important. So almost 100 milligram of magnesium is absorbed from the GIT, which is filtered in the urine. Rest of the magnesium they usually stored mostly in the bone and in the muscle. And kidney is the main regulatory site which keeps the serum magnesium level in a tight control. So actually one slide is missing. I'm trying to say, yeah, sorry. So why I want to highlight this thing? Because the magnesium is tightly regulated in the kidneys, mostly in thick ascending loop of Henle. So any disorder mostly affecting the tubules are responsible for hypomagnesemia. I'll put it in another way. The most common causes of hypomagnesemia are because of the tubular injury. Less frequently, they are because of the sequestration, because of intracellular shift, and least frequently it is because of the malabsorption. So that's why we have to understand how it gets absorbed in the tubule. So basically it gets absorbed in the paracellular space of the thick ascending loop of Henle along with the calcium channels. Just I want to mention that when there is a excessive tubular filtration load here, more amount of sodium and chloride gets absorbed into the paracellular space. So along with that sodium chloride, more amount of magnesium also get reabsorbed. So any condition which leads to a hyperfiltration usually leads to a excess leak of magnesium and hypomagnesemia. Similarly, the most important protein is here is a claudin gene which regulates this absorption. So anything that affects the claudin leads to hypomagnesemia. I am not going to discuss the details of this, which is beyond the scope of this class. So this has practical utility when we discuss the causes of hypomagnesemia. So one can look into the boldness of the letter. More those which are written in a bold letters means they are the more common causes, like those are renal wasting. We are not going to discuss the genetic syndrome, which is a purely domain of the nephrologist or the endocrinologist. But most frequently, we find hypomagnesemia because of one of the following conditions, which may involve the renal tubules. Many drugs which also involve the renal tubules, they are very commonly used, such as alcohol, diuretics, this aminoglycoside amphotericin B, which is very commonly practiced, not only here but also outside. Many immunomodulatory therapies, chemotherapeutic agents. And these are some common causes like any extracellular fluid expansion state such as hyperaldosteronism, diabetes mellitus. Sometimes hypercalcemia and metabolic acidosis is directly toxic to the claudin gene and they can cause hypomagnesemia. These things not uncommon in a tertiary care center like us, like many of the specialties, for example, endocrinology, gastroenterology, endocrine surgeon, and they see this kind of condition, especially during recovery from decay, refeeding syndrome, especially in a hungry bone syndrome, and especially after pancreatitis or massive burn, sometimes after massive blood transfusion. Rarely it is caused by a poor absorption from the GI. So the clinical features they just present just like those of hypocalcemia. They may present in form of fasciculation, convulsion, which are features of neuromuscular excitability. When we examine these patients may have tetany, hyperreflexia, and a positive prostate and prostate sign. In addition, there may be muscle weakness and several neuropsychiatric features. So, if hypomagnesemia is not treated, it can lead to devastating outcomes which can lead to death. These may include hypocalcemia and hypokalemia per se. Usually, hypomagnesemia lead to an impaired secretion of parathyroid hormone, which can lead to hypocalcemia. How it exactly causes hypokalemia, it is not known. Either of these parameters or in combination, they can cause life-threatening cardiovascular complications such as arrhythmia, torsades pointis, and sudden death. So, in setting of a hypomagnesemia, one should do one ECG in which we can find a prolonged PR or QT interval, which is seen in this patient per se. There may be T-wave flattening and inversion and ST segments straightening. So one should remember these findings are mostly because of hypocalcemia resulting from the hypomagnesemia. Even they may result because of hypomagnesemia per se. So if one of these features are present in presence of this, one should be really alert and take emergency maneuver and initiation of intravenous magnesium therapy. So what are the common clinical settings when we should suspect hypomagnesemia? Like chronic diarrhea, conditions which favor renal magnesium wasting, such as poorly controlled diabetes, any condition which lead to hyperaldosteronism. This should be especially thought in admitted patients who have refractory hypocalcemia, where we get a difficulty even after giving good amount of calcium and vitamin D, refractory hypokalemia, and ventricular arrhythmias. So in this situation, especially the life-threatening situations, one should draw the blood for magnesium and other investigation part are necessary. And one can start empirically intravenous magnesium chloride if available. And if magnesium chloride not available, one can give intravenous magnesium sulfate while monitoring the serum magnesium and calcium levels. The therapy can be modified depending upon the serum magnesium later on. So like we discussed, whenever you get on magnesium, apart from few investigation, always look for these things in the history. Look for the prescription carefully for the medications which can result in hypomagnesemia. And especially in setting of chronic hypomagnesemia, look for the family history and associated electrolyte abnormalities. So, where the etiology of hypomagnesemia is not clear, one can do a fractional excretion of magnesium to find out the possible source of hypomagnesemia. So, usually the 24 urinary magnesium excretion up to 30 milligram. Anywhere the urinary magnesium excretion is more than 40 milligram over 24 hours in setting of a hypomagnesemia implies it is because of the urinary magnesium loss. that will be equivalent to a fractional excretion magnesium of 4%. So, like in the case which we discussed before this topic, where there are multiple etiologies, multiple factors which can cause hypomagnesemia, a fractional excretion of magnesium actually helped us indicating it is a renal excretion. So, the multiple etiologies like poorly controlled diabetes, which we controlled by insulin infusion. Then there was alcohol intake that was stopped. Then the torsemide. Obviously, we could not stop the torsemide at that moment, but subsequently it was stopped. So with all these modalities, the serum magnesium improved and it did not recur later. So I will also mention another entity which is called normomagnesic magnesium depletion. So basically, this terminology has been defined in setting up refractory hypokalemia and hypocalcemia. So people have done certain kind of audits and retrospective studies where they have found that in setting up refractory hypokalemia and hypocalcemia, even the magnesium levels are low normal. It should be considered as a magnesium depression, and this should be managed just like any patient of hypomagnesemia. And in fact, many papers have shown that the calcium and potassium levels actually improve after the magnesium supplementation. So I'm just telling if where there is you are giving too good amount dose of potassium supplementation in setting up hypokalemia or really good amount of calcium supplementation in setting up a hypocalcemia, still your calcium and potassium levels are not coming up. You must measure a serum magnesium, and if it is low normal, then you should consider treating it just like a hypomagnesemia. The principle is that the intracellular stores may be really depleted, which might not have been reflected in the serum magnesium level. Yes, Chandan. So, to summarize whatever we have discussed, any patient with hypomagnesemia, if the etiology is not clear, we should measure the urinary magnesium. If the fractional excretion of magnesium is more than 4%, that means it has a renal cause. Depending upon the history and examination, we should decide whether it has a genetic basis or it is because of the acquired causes. So in those scenario, we should look for the drugs and renal disorders which can cause this. If the urine magnesium is less than 2%, either it may be GI cause or maybe a sequestration where the underlying etiology is quite evident. So coming to the treatment. So oral magnesium salts can be given if patient has mild and asymptomatic course. Nowadays, we frequently get magnesium oxide tablets outside. Previously, it was not available. So it is very easy to treat with magnesium oxide. Usually, the dose is around 480 to 720 milligram per day. It can be given in divided doses. If at all the magnesium oxide or chloride salts are not available, we can use magnesium hydroxide, which are present in the commonly available antacid preparations and milk of magnesia. So one should be careful in setting up renal failure. The basic principle is in presence of renal failure, you just give half the scheduled dose and monitor the magnesium levels more frequently. If patient is symptomatic, there is presence of hypocalcemia and hypokalemia. In presence of a hypomagnesemia, one should prefer parenteral magnesium therapy. The ideal therapy is magnesium chloride. Unfortunately, this preparation is not available here. Elsewise, we can give intravenous magnesium sulfate, but the problem with intravenous magnesium sulfate is the magnesium content is too low, and theoretically, these sulfate ions can bind to the calcium ions and further deteriorate the serum calcium levels. So, one should monitor the serum calcium levels at least 2 to 4 times a day. This point we discussed, like the therapy has to be continued at least 3 to 5 days, even after the normalization of the serum magnesium levels. This I'm going to skip because in the emergency or rarely the cardiologist may see a torsades point. This is a standard therapy. In addition to the correction of the magnesium, one should identify other electrolyte abnormalities and rectify it. If there is presence of vitamin D deficiency, one should treat it. And in setting of glomerular hyperfiltration, especially in presence of diabetes, aldosteronism, and other conditions, one may consider ACE inhibitor or ARB.